The most unlikely plug-in hybrid. How pickup trucks really crash. And the top 5 car technologies you really care about. It's time to check the tech. We see cars differently. Nice. We love them on the road and under the hood, but also check the tech and are known for telling it like it is. Ugly is included at no extra cost. The good, the bad, the bottom line. This is CNET on Cars. Welcome to CNET on Cars, the show all about high-tech cars and modern driving. I'm Brian Cooley. Well, thanks to MPG and clean air targets in California and about a dozen other states, we're getting some very odd vehicles with plugs in them these days. None more unexpected than the Mercedes S-Class plug-in hybrid. Is it a sign of the times, a sign of the future, or just the price of doing business? Let's drive it and check the tech. Now, this is Mercedes-Benz first plug-in hybrid, but it's not their first hybrid. It's not even their first S-Class hybrid. They used to have this unloved beast called the S400. That was a mild hybrid without the plug-in part, and it did mild things for the MPG, like 4 better in the city, not bad, and 0 better on the highway, so nobody cared. It died in 2013. This is a much more serious animal with a much bigger battery and the ability to be plugged in as well as generate on the fly. Now, back here, of course, is where the big battery lives, the additional traction battery for the powertrain. This is clearly taking up some space back here, although it's by no means killing the trunk. This is an 8.7 kilowatt-hour capacity battery. To put that in context, compare it to a Nissan Leaf, which is electric only. That has a 24 kilowatt-hour battery. A Tesla Model S has either a 70 or 85 kilowatt-hour battery. So this is a more modest helper, since this car isn't only an EV. You charge it right there in what I believe is the only charging port I've run into yet that is integrated back here on the bumper. Some folks have expressed concern that that's a very frequently hit part of a car, and how often will that be disabled by bumps and dings in parking lots? Don't know. It's a 2-hour charge from flat on a 240-volt circuit, which you'd certainly want to have at your home. Now, inside the S550 hybrid is a lot of familiar territory. Very plush, very comfortable, and this wonderland of dual giant LCD widescreens. I'm not going to recover all this cabin technology. For that, head over to CNET and just search S550, and you'll find our detailed review of the debut of this in gas engine form. We take all this apart. Here's what I want you to notice, though. 2 new controls on the console. This one here has a little battery icon above the car. As you cycle through that, you get 4 different modes right there on the instrument panel. Hybrid's going to be your most common mode. It's your well-understood blend of gas and electric power. E-mode is electric power only, silent running, and the accelerator pedal will actually push back if you're goosing it too hard to optimize battery drain. E-save defends the battery state by using the electric motor the least and recharging it the most. And charge goes the furthest. It prioritizes charging the battery above all and doesn't use electric motor at all. Honestly, there's a lot of inside baseball here. I bet you'll just leave it in hybrid mode. And this button right here has an E+ mode. It's a separate layer, separate from those 4. It gets a little complex here. That one, among other things, is going to set up camera and radar to look ahead. And if you're closing on a vehicle in traffic where you're going to have to trounce the brakes and waste inertia, it's going to prompt you to do so more gently and earlier, conserving momentum. Now, unlike what you expect from an S-Class, there's not some big, brawny engine in here. It's fairly small. It's a 3-liter gas engine V6, still a V. You've got your bright orange electrical current cables down here, and that means you're attached to, of course, the electric motor, which is embedded in the transmission on this vehicle, inside the works of the 7-speed automatic. So it's highly integral for both adding oomph as well as doing regeneration of power going back to the battery. Some of the numbers compared to your base V8 S550. 329 horse on this guy, plus another 114 from the E-motor give you an odd 436 total. The gas engine car has 449, so that's 13 better. Torque here is 479 pound-feet, 516 on the gas V8, so we're losing 37. Both have the same 7-speed automatic architecture, although the gas engine car can be had all-wheel drive. This hybrid goes to 60 in 5.2 seconds. The gas engine car is a little quicker at 4.8. And of course, that big battery, charging apparatus, and electric motor add weight. The MPG is notably improved. We're 2430 in the hybrid, just 1726 without it. And of course, where there is no comparison is electric range. This car can go 20 miles on electric power only in the right conditions, and up to 80 miles per hour on pure electric. This is a key part of the strategy that helps this car work on the credits that Mercedes needs in zero emissions marketplaces like California and other very stringent states. All right, now underway, you know that an S-Class is a big buttery thing. This one's bigger and butterier. It has this incredibly modulated ride, of course, owing to that 450 pounds of battery in the back. Unfortunately, the throttle response is real lumpy. Sometimes you've got a bunch of power, sometimes you have a good amount, but it's not the same kind. Deceleration is coming in and out because you've got all these different drive modes of electric, gas and electric, and different kinds of regen. It's just not linear, and if you trounce the pedal and really get onto a freeway on-ramp or something, absolutely no problem. It's that around town stuff where it's a little bit, in and out of different modes that's jarring, which doesn't make sense in a car like this. So I'm left wondering who's really going to get excited about this car. Who out there is saying, finally, that's the S-Class I wanted. It saves some gas, it's measurable, but it's no Prius. So what are we left with? I think an S-Class that the world wasn't asking for, but California and other state regulators were. Okay, pricing on this S550 hybrid is about $95,300 delivered. What is interesting is that base price is the exact same as the gas engine V8 twin turbo. There is no hybrid penalty on this car. That's pretty notable. Other things to bear in mind is these kind of luxury cars, and particularly the S-Class, have dramatic 5-year depreciation. I think that'll be compounded by the fact that you've got a hybrid here, which is probably going to be much better in 5 years, and this will be the antiquated technology. That's not going to do you any favors either. Also know that this is only available rear-wheel drive. If you want all-wheel drive, you got to get a gas engine only. Find our full review on that Mercedes S550e with the plug and the bumper over at cars.cnet.com. Well, you don't have to live in Texas to know that a pickup truck for many people is also the family car. So you want it to absolutely be safe. But verifying that has become surprisingly controversial in recent months. We'll update the smarter driver when CNET on Cars returns. Ford's new F-150 truck passes the IIHS small overlap crash test with flying colors, except for the ones that don't. The big cab Super Crew version received the coveted top safety pick. The shorter Super Cab version earned only a marginal rating in the same crash.
In the front small overlap crash test of the extended cab F-150, the tow pan and pedals moved nearly a foot back towards the dummy's legs. Steering column moved 8 inches towards his chest, coming dangerously close.
The difference turned out to be a set of special steel reinforcing tubes welded in front of and behind each front wheel in the bigger Super Crew model. The smaller Super Cab doesn't have them. A key takeaway here is that the IIHS can't and doesn't test every version of every car and truck that it crashes. Usually it doesn't matter, but here it clearly does. And as a result, the Institute has just made it policy that it will test multiple body styles of big pickups. That will soon include Silverado, Tundra, and Ram, which just announced it has added reinforcing bars to all its cab styles.
3, 2...
It pays to double-check which model of pickup truck you're considering buying and knowing if that's the exact cab version that was tested, or was it a different one that may not collapse quite the same way. Welcome back to CNET on Cars, coming to you from our home at the Mount Tam Motor Club just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. Well, you may have heard me mention in some recent performance car videos we've done that the vehicle had a dry sump lubrication system, the biggest oxymoron in all of Autodom. We've actually got a number of cars coming up that have one as well. So it seems like it's time for a Car Tech 101 on dry sump. Now, most cars, including very likely yours, have what's called a wet sump. Sump being the old German Dutch word for a muddy, wet bog or marsh, which is actually a pretty good analogy for what happens down here at the bottom of your engine, as what's known as the oil pan or the crankcase, also known as the sump.
The heart of the lubrication system is the oil pump. The two revolving gears create a suction as the teeth move apart. This suction draws oil from the storage reservoir or oil pan.
When this is a wet sump, that means basically all your oil lives down here, except when it's being pumped out, circulated around the engine through little passages where it gets all the things that need lubrication lubricated, and then it drips back down here to do the cycle over again. The problems with that design are actually many. First of all, look at this pan down here, or on this V8 to my right. They're both big and tall. That means the engine has to sit higher in the car to not scrape the ground or bump into suspension. That means a higher center of gravity, a higher hood, nose, what have you. The automakers don't like that. Secondly, the oil keeps coming back to this same hot place, so it's hard to cool the oil. Third, because this can only be a given size to fit in the engine bay, you can only have so much oil. Engines would like to have more oil, fresher oil, and cooler oil. And fourth, you get oil starvation in a design like this. The oil is just kind of down there by luck and by gravity. In hard cornering, sometimes it moves to one side, and the pickup where the oil is sucked up goes dry once in a while. When that happens, the bearings go dry. Not good on a high-performance engine. A dry sump seeks to cure all that.
It's the first high-performance sports car with dry sump lubrication for a lower center of gravity.
A dry sump engine still has a pan at the bottom of the engine, but it's much smaller. It catches oil and it's immediately then pumped out to a reservoir somewhere else on the car, where typically another pump then moves it back to the engine. It's all very controlled and done under positive pressure. You end up getting a lower engine and lower center of gravity because you don't have a great big pan to protect down at the bottom. You have no oil starvation in hard cornering because everything is done under positive pressure. And you end up likely with cooler oil because it gets a vacation from being in the engine all the time. And you can have a lot more of it because the oil reservoir can be as big as you have room to fit. The downside of a dry sump design is basically cost and complexity. You've got a pump or two that are external to the engine. You've got some very critical plumbing. And you've got that reservoir to hold all that oil. It has to go somewhere else in the car. So they're only justified in high-performance situations today. But if you look at a high-performance car, or look at our reviews of them, you're going to increasingly see the dry sump design making its way into vehicles that are not just track cars, that are high-performance road cars.
In a moment, measuring mileage, demystifying all those conflicting numbers, and the car tech you really want when CNET on Cars continues.
This is an Aston Martin Vanquish. It's a Grand Tourer and has a big engine. It's what happens when you decide you want to treat yourself after a lifetime of hard work. You see, this car's party piece is its 6-litre V12. It kicks out 568 brake horsepower and 456 pound-foot. It'll crack 200 miles an hour if you've got the space, and you'll get from 0 to 62 in 3.8 seconds. And that makes it the quickest accelerating full production car Aston has ever made. Which means there's potential for a lot of silliness indeed.
Find more from the X-Car team of CNET UK at cnet.com/xcar.
Welcome back to CNET on Cars. I'm Brian Cooley. Here's a part of the show where I take one of your emails. In this case, I'm going to take a whole slew of your emails. But before we get to those, I want to give a nod to Keith in the Philippines, who sent us some photos of his wheel upgrade from last episode's email section. Remember, he has a Honda City with 15s on it. He wanted to go to 19s. I suggested more like 17s or 18s. He finally ended up doing his wheel conversion to a nice set of 18s. They look really good. Nice work, Keith. Now we've got a trio of emails to get to about units and measurements that we use on the show as we communicate the specs of cars. The first one comes in from Bostian, who says, when you present technical information about a car, I usually convert the units to metric myself. Last time I tried a different online calculator to go from MPG to liters per 100 kilometers, and I found out that this calculator gave me 20% lower results than one I used previously. He asked, can you please give me the right formula to convert MPG to liters per 100, weight, pounds to kilograms, and also acceleration time, the 0 to 60 thing that we talk about here in the U.S. Well, let's take those one at a time. First of all, when you're comparing MPG on cars, especially around the world, you've got to get to apples and apples. MPG and liters to 100 are actually not. That's apples to oranges. You want to take liters per 100 kilometers and compare that to gallons per 100 miles. That stat is actually rated on U.S. cars, but almost nobody knows about it over here. It's in the fine print on the window sticker and other places. We talk about MPG in the U.S., but in fact, when you're comparing two cars, it's actually not a good way to do it for some weird rounding errors that are beyond my grade level in math. Once you do look at gallons or liters per miles or kilometers, you end up with a very easy piece of mathematical conversion to do. Converting pounds to kilograms is easy. 1 pound is 0.45 kilograms. Kilograms are much heavier. And 0 to 60 in the U.S. or 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in Europe, which is 62 miles per hour, is messy. You can't just do a numerical conversion because each car has got its own unique torque curve. And the way that it gets to those additional 2 miles per hour is not just a straight extrapolation. It may spike up or spike down for that last little bit. It's not a big deal, but you can't just do it numerically, I'm afraid. They are somewhat different measurements. Okay, next one comes in from Omar. He's writing in from Malaysia. He says, regarding fuel consumption, I've been wondering if the gallons you state are U.S. gallons or imperial gallons. He says he finds that over on our sister site, XCar, the fuel efficiency seems to be much higher than he hears on CNET on cars. Okay, so the gallon thing is very different. Imperial gallons, as are quoted on cars sold in the UK market, are 17% bigger, 17% more fuel than a US gallon. So you're going to see a complete difference in the amount you get per gallon of fuel. It's not even close. And the last one comes in from Patrick P. He's in North Carolina, but travels a lot. He says, I'm on business in the UK this week, and I've noticed that here, cars tend to get about 20 mpg more than their US counterparts. He says, I went on Ford's website and saw that a Focus, just like I have at home with the power shift transmission, gets 54 mpg in the UK, and his in the US is rated at just 37 highway. Why the big discrepancy, he asks. A few things are going on. First of all, see the note we just talked about on imperial gallons. You're seeing an imperial gallon rating, and because those gallons are bigger, yeah, they get a lot more mileage out of their bigger gallon. Secondly, the way cars are tested in Europe and the United Kingdom, the actual circuit they drive to measure fuel economy is very different than in the U.S. As I understand it, it tends to be a shorter drive at lower speeds than we do here in the U.S. Finally, know that there are very different power plants in Europe. The Focus there may not have the engine you have over here, even if the transmission's the same. European consumers will accept a lot of manual gearboxes. They'll accept a lot of smaller engines that American consumers just aren't interested in. So it tends to be more different than the sheet metal would suggest. Now, we try to explore every new technology in cars here at CNET on Cars. That's kind of our mission. But let's face it, there's always a core of these things that most consumers care about the most. And that makes for an interesting top 5. J.D. Power asked consumers about 59 car tech features, ranging from those involved in energy efficiency to in-cabin entertainment.
We've ranked the top 5 responses based on how many people selected the technology for their shortlist.
Number 5, self-healing paint, 25%. There's really no such thing as self-healing paint. There is Nissan's Scratch Shield, but that only smooths out very minor scrapes in the clear coat only, not the paint. But we so hate the expensive, time-consuming results of a dent or scratch that we keep on dreaming. Number 4, a rear camera with the display in the mirror, 30%. Not just a rear cam, but one that has a little tiny display. At least it's up where you should be looking when backing, instead of looking down. Number 3, collision mitigating braking, 30%. This is one of the most gettable of the early self-driving technologies, the one that will jump on the brakes when you forget to. Any of you think this might be driven by the guilt people feel about staring down at their phones in traffic? Number 2 is night vision technology, 33%. Here's an odd one, since so few people have ever tried it. Apparently, not enough to know that, in my experience, it often sucks. But we love anything with the phrase night vision in it. Before I get you to the number 1 technology we want in cars, here are the ones we want the least, like health and wellness technology, gesture control, and haptic feedback screens. Bless your hearts, you're right on the money there. Interestingly, missing from the top ranks of what we do want are hybrid technology and the latest smartphone integration, like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Maybe they just need some time. The number one technology you say you want in a car is blind spot tech, 40%. The automotive blind spot, back over there, is one we know we need help with. And they're only getting worse because cars keep bulking up more and more like fortresses on wheels. Who says you got to join the Army to drive a tank? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Seems like you did because the emails come in a torrent. And I'm glad you do that. It's oncars@cnet.com. I read every one, reply to as many as I can, and a lot of them become segments in the show. I'll see you next time we check the tech.